Welcome to the Happiness Podcast. I'm Dr. Robert Puff. We face a lot of challenges in life. Some of them hard, some of them not so hard. But I do think one of the hardest ones that we do have to face is being alone. And it's not that there's a shortage of people on the planet. There's almost 8 billion people living on planet Earth right now. What happens is we fall in love, we meet new friends, we meet people that really have an impact on our lives. We grow up with family members that are important to us. And then they leave. They go away. They die. The relationship ends. Something changes. And we're alone. And in that aloneness, sometimes we feel lonely. One of the most poignant times this ever happened to me is when I was younger. I had saved up a lot of money from a job I had the previous summer, and I was able to use that money to go to Europe the following year. I spent 3 months there, and I had a wonderful time. I went by myself, but I stayed in a lot of youth hostels, so I was regularly meeting new people, and sometimes I would travel with them. And I would write letters back home, and every once in a while I was able to go to a city, and letters would be waiting for me at the post office. This was pre-internet time. But I do remember going to Venice, Italy. If you've never been there, it is a beautiful city. And I would call it quite romantic. At least to my eyes, it seemed very romantic. And I saw all these couples walking around together. And I was there by myself. I wasn't traveling with anyone at that point. I was on my own. And I remember this deep sense of loneliness filling my heart. At that time, I wasn't in a relationship, and seeing all those romantic couples and being in that such romantic place made me long for it, made me wish to be with someone, to be in a romantic relationship. And I wasn't. And that aloneness made me feel very lonely. And though I was much younger back then, I do remember thinking this thought. Why have I spent almost 3 months in Europe and felt completely fine, not lonely in the least, even though there were many days I was traveling by myself? And then I go to this one city and I feel so lonely. What was going on? Well, it took me a long time to figure it out, but thankfully I was able to. And it's been so helpful in my journey through life. And I'd like to share with you what I learned. In many ways, it really boils down to our expectations about what ought to be happening in our lives. As we journey through life, we have expectations. We may expect, when we're in high school, to meet a sweetheart or someone that we care for, that we can go to proms with and homecomings with, and go on weekend dates with. When we go to university, we may expect to find the person that we want to spend our lives with and begin dating with them, and perhaps a few years later, living with them, and by the time we're in our mid-20s, being married and starting our family. And we may expect throughout life to have a really good friend that journeys with us throughout our lives. We meet them in perhaps junior high, and they're going to be with us to the very end. We may be very close to one of our parents or a sibling, and really expect them to be there for us for as long as possible. Our parents better live into their 90s if we're close to them, or otherwise there's going to be pain and suffering. When we have children, they better be around and be close to us, otherwise it's going to create problems for us. It's these expectations that get us in trouble. It's not that they're unrealistic. We do want to find our soulmate. We do want to have a really close friend. We really do expect our family to live a long, full life and enjoy them throughout our lives. But then life happens. People move away. Love ends. People die early. And when that happens, if our expectations are too strong, we will suffer. We will feel lonely when we're alone. But thankfully, life has ways of teaching us lessons. We do have that really close friend, perhaps when we're younger, in our early teens, and we talk about being best friends for the rest of our lives. And then something happens, and it changes, and at the time it's very upsetting. But then we move on, and we're okay. We may fall deeply in love with someone in high school and expect to spend our lives with them. And again, something happens, and we move on, and we're okay. We may have a parent or a relative that gets sick early, perhaps cancer, and they pass. And for a while, we are very upset and sad. But then we learn that we do move on, and we're okay. So what's happening is, when there is a change, when there is a shift, it will create some sadness, some loneliness. But if we realize that life is change, then we say, okay, I may have expected this person to never leave my life, but I know that was an unrealistic expectation, and it's okay. I'm going to be okay. Because getting back to my journey in Europe, I think I had been in Europe for about 2 months of my 3-month trip when I went to Venice. And I was totally fine. I wasn't in a relationship. I wasn't dating anyone. And I was totally, completely fine with that. And when I got to Venice, all of a sudden, my heart said, why aren't you in a relationship? What's wrong? You're lonely. Look at all these beautiful couples, and they're so in love, and you don't have anyone to be with. Poor guy, you're lonely. And yet, once I left Venice, really, the day I left and started traveling again, I was fine. It was just that moment, being in that romantic city, that started creating expectations for my mind and heart, and it caused me to suffer. Once those expectations left, I was completely fine the rest of my trip. Once I stopped feeding and creating stories about what ought to be, and instead just living with what was, I was fine. Because it's the stories that we create, the expectations we have, the things we say in our head all day long that cause us to suffer in regards to loneliness. We're not lonely if we say, it's okay if I have dinner by myself. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay if today I'm going to go to a movie by myself. What's wrong with that? People go by themselves. And maybe someone will look at me and say, why is this person by themselves at a movie? Who knows? Why do I care? I'm not going to judge other people for going to dinner or movies by themselves. Why would I judge myself? And if they do, that's their issue. I'm enjoying myself. I'm enjoying this meal. I'm enjoying my own company. And a lot of what helps us to be alone without being lonely is learning to enjoy ourselves. Because the truth is, we do spend a lot of time being alone. In the mornings when we're getting ready, we are often alone. When we commute to work, many times we do that by ourselves. Throughout the day, there are many times when we're doing things alone without someone else being there. We may on our weekends enjoy just going for a walk by ourselves and reading a book by ourselves. The difference is why we're okay at those moments and not lonely, because we don't have any expectations that we need to be with someone. We say, it's totally fine being alone. What's wrong with that? But when we have expectations that, no, I need to be with someone when I do this activity, or no, I'm at this age where I need to have someone in my life, then we're going to suffer, because those expectations create suffering. When we learn that in any situation, we can be okay. We can be alone without being lonely. Then we relax. But here's the other thing. Yes, many of us enjoy being with another person. Some people really do enjoy their time alone and they prefer that. But many of us would say, I'd rather go to a movie or dinner with a friend or someone I'm dating or in a relationship with. That's fine. So what we do is we work towards cultivating relationships, new ones, because we can always meet people. Again, when I was in Europe, I would meet someone at a youth hostel, and I would say, what are you doing today? And they say, oh, we're going here. I'd say, can I join you? And they'd say, sure, that'd be great. We might spend the day together, or perhaps travel a couple of days together. And it was wonderful. And then we'd go our separate ways. In life, it's much like that. We meet people, we perhaps spend a day, a month, a year, 10 years with them, and then something changes and they go one way and we go another. And during those interludes where we don't perhaps have someone close in our lives, we realize we always have ourselves and we can be close to ourselves. So we learn to do things alone, because we do things alone all the time. And we're fine and we don't suffer. But once we start creating expectations that I need to be with some, I don't want to go on vacation alone, then we're going to suffer. So instead we say, I would prefer to go to dinner tonight with a friend. I would prefer on my next vacation to travel with someone, perhaps someone I'm dating. But if I'm not going to be able to do that, it will still be okay. I'll enjoy myself. I'll explore. I'll enjoy this meal. I'll get out and see things. And if today the universe brings me a great friend or a soulmate, and then tomorrow they're gone, I'm okay. Because with them, I'm okay. And without them, I'm okay. And we're okay when we realize the only reason we're not okay is because of our expectations, because of the stories we're creating in our head. That's what causes us to suffer. So once we realize that, then we can stop creating those stories and just focus on enjoying our meal by ourselves. We can just focus on being on vacation and seeing the sights by ourselves. We can just focus on sleeping in our own bed by ourselves and say, that's okay. Someday that may change. Maybe it won't. But today, right now, it's okay. And when we do that, which I talk about so much on the Happiness podcast, when we take one day at a time, one breath at a time, we'll find that we're truly never lonely, even when we're alone. And the way we do that is we realize that it's our expectations that make us feel lonely. So when we begin to hear those expectations of what ought to be or what should be, we say, no, it's okay the way things are. If I can change something, I will. But right now, this is what is, and I'm going to accept that. And I'm going to love that. And when we do that, we will find that when we are alone, we are never lonely. Thank you for joining me on the Happiness Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, please go to happinesspodcast.org. And until next time, accept what is, love what is.